I've made it no secret on this channel that I have a love, or maybe obsession is a more accurate word, for the Mutant Chronicles franchise, and its accompanying miniatures wargame Warzone has been a big part of my life. The very first miniatures I ever painted at the ripe old age of 12 were Warzone models. The first wargaming rulebook I ever read was for Warzone. It's a big part of my gaming journey. That said, Warzone has had a turbulent history. It has come and gone in various iterations over the last 30 years, and the newest version is upon us with Warzone Eternal. Now, full disclosure, I was actually thinking of sitting this game out. I'd seen Warzone die unceremoniously so many times, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to handle it. But after trying it, I've been sucked in. And with the pedigree of having Brian Steele writing the rules, I have confidence the Eternal will last. Warzone Eternal is a 32mm skirmish miniatures game, with most forces numbering around a dozen models at most, played using a D20 system on a 3 foot by 3 foot table. This is the smallest edition of Warzone to date, as far as I'm aware, with first being sort of a large skirmish with a handful of squads. Second edition, Ultimate, and Resurrection were all more platoon scaled games, and I gotta say, I like it being skirmish. Not only because it means less models to paint overall, but it feels more intimate. It also makes the actions all feel really impactful. Eternal borrows quite a bit in design philosophy from first edition, which isn't a bad thing. The stat blocks are nearly identical, with first edition's action stat replaced with a defense stat. And I feel like this really works well in a skirmish game. It basically took the core mechanical concepts from 1995 of a D20 roll under system, streamlined the actual gameplay elements, and brought it up to date so it doesn't feel dated. The basics of the game are pretty easy to grasp. Players alternate activating models. Each model can take two actions when it activates. These actions cover everything from moving, shooting, charging, and fighting in melee. But when it's not your turn, your guys don't just stand idly by with their thumbs up their asses. They can use reactions, allowing them to shoot back, strike back in melee, or duck and cover to get bonuses to armor when being shot at. And while some other games with reaction systems have a tendency to overcomplicate things, Warzone keeps it pretty streamlined and easy to understand. This constant involvement in the game is great, and the added strategic level of when best to give units reaction counters during a turn is very welcome. There is also, of course, just a very real satisfaction in watching your opponent take it to the dome as they try and run in and secure an objective. Combat is as easy as ever. As I said, it's a D20 roll under system, which I know some people dislike and say it goes against wargaming convention, but it's been in the Warzone DNA for 30 goddamn years, so that argument holds less water than a kitchen strainer. It's a pretty straightforward game of modifiers, and aside from a few like cover or aiming, all of them are listed handily on the included stat cards. This means there's actually very little needing to memorize things or constantly checking back to the rulebook to remember all of the applicable modifiers when taking a shot at the enemy. The only thing in combat that feels a little unintuitive at first is damage. Instead of being a flat pass or fail, there are levels. Not many, mind, but when you make an armor roll, you need to keep track of by how much you fail or succeed. If you fail by up to 5, you take a wound and a pin counter. And if you fail by more than 5, you take 2 wounds and the pin. You can also gain a pin counter when you succeed an armor roll by up to 5. So you do want to be aware of your rolls. It's not as clunky as it may sound here, but it did take a bit to get used to. Since most human sized models have 2 wounds, you can still potentially one shot someone if they roll poorly enough, but failing a save isn't a guaranteed death right out of the gate. Despite this, Warzone Eternal can feel lethal. This shouldn't be a surprise, seeing how Brian Steele also wrote the excellent Dark Age, which was known for its brutal lethality. It's also known for being old yellered by Simon so they could churn out more fucking zombicide instead of one of the best skirmish games to have graced tables. And no, I won't ever forgive them for killing that, or Wrath of Kings. Warzone can feel like a game of shooting, and in my experience, most combat is ranged, but don't count out melee focused units. On a table with appropriate terrain, melee can be just as brutal, if not more so, than shooting. Because you get two actions per model, it's possible to charge, which grants you a free strike action, and then take your second action to swing again if need be. It's also possible to cut someone down that you're already engaged with and then charge someone else who wandered too close and enjoy the chaos of blades swirling. Or if you want to get really saucy, you can charge one guy, kill him, and then charge another guy if your opponent lines their models up for you. Now, as they, and by they I mean I, say, no game is perfect. I already mentioned that the damage mechanics can seem a little weird at first, but if I had any real gripe, it would be the line of sight mechanics. Warzone Eternal uses a point to point system, where you draw a line of sight to points of a model to determine cover and the likes. Now, to its credit, it works better in practice than I thought it would on my initial reading of the rules. That said, I'm still not entirely sold on it. I'm not a big fan of true line of sight systems, much preferring volumetric if I had my druthers. On terrain dense tables, it can be a bitch to get down and get eye level of a model. Not to mention, I'm not young anymore, and constantly crouching down to get line of sight can play hell on my knees. But, as is often the case, the rest of the mechanics are so solid that I'm happy to deal with something that I'm not a big fan of to play the game because it's otherwise amazing. And that's all without even getting into the spectacular models. They blend the 90s style with modern styles in a way that Resurrection tried but didn't quite nail. These, however, meet the brief perfectly. I also really like that the chasseurs for Cybertronic went with a decidedly more second edition sculpting style than their first edition counterparts, because, woof. Overall, while there's still a part of me that worries Eternal will fall prey to the same bullshit that has plagued the franchise in the past, so far, things are looking very good for Warzone. With excellent sculpts, great rules, a really passionate team behind it, and a game that won't break the bank, Warzone Eternal is certainly one to look into. Plus, the rules are free to download if you want to check them out yourself. I'll put a link in the description below. If you want a solid skirmish game with that techno fantasy vibe in the 90s, check out Warzone Eternal. And if someone in your area is doing demos, get one. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and a big thanks to my buddy Gavin for letting me use his painted up starter sets for the footage of this video. Don't forget, you can follow me over on Instagram, and stay tuned because there will be more Warzone content in the future. What can I say? I'm weak against this franchise.